What's going on, everyone? This is CJ here, back with another podcast, 5.0 to be exact, of the Bare Necessities Pod. And I know I'm going to be pretty late to the whatever you want to call it here, late to the party with some of this information because it probably came out like over a week ago. But obviously, I have a full-time job. I can't, dedicate this, sadly, to my everyday work, but I'm just trying to get the stuff in that I can. And as I was doing this, I had to add more information because some big time news broke today, and we'll get into that as well. But without further ado, let's move on. So the first thing we want to talk about is free agency. And if you guys are following along on YouTube, you'll be able to see my slides here that I created. But I'm hoping that my audio will be enough for you if you cannot see the slides. And I apologize for the notifications. I've got to get that fixed so that when I'm going through this, no notifications are popping up. But anyways, we are going to continue here. So there's a quote from Ryan Poles, and he said, "With a clearer vision, the more aggressive you can be in free agency." Now, this is great news because the coaching staff is brand new there. It seems like a lot of the guys that were there before didn't have a clear vision, like you said. They didn't have a good plan, or if their plan was failing, they didn't know how to get back on the right track. So they ended up cutting Gerald Everett, DeMarcus Walker, freed up about 11 million more, which totaled them to $79 million in money that they can do to use to sign other free agents. And in addition to that, the overall salary cap increased by 20 million this year, and overall 53 million the last 2 years combined. But back to Ryan Poles with this clear vision idea, they're going to sign the guys that they need for Ben Johnson's offense. They're going to sign the guys that they need for Dennis Allen's offense. And obviously, we all know as Bears fans watching this team, we need a better line. We need guys that are better on that offensive line. And in particular with the interior, we need another edge rusher to play on the opposite side of Montez Sweat, and we need another defensive tackle that can rotate in for Billings and Dexter, and possibly even start if one of those guys get injured. Like last year, Billings was out. We had nobody to come in and help, and I feel like truly Dexter's was about to jump into like Pro Bowl caliber player, but then Billings went down and that was it. Like he was good still, but he got more double teams. He wasn't able to get to the quarterback as much because that inside presence of Billings was just not there anymore. So I'm gonna quote Poles again, and this is what he said as well during one of his press conference interviews. I forget if this was at the draft combine or if this was on ESPN 1000 or somewhere else because Pold and Ben Johnson have been everywhere lately speaking to different platforms. So I can't exactly quote the platform, and I apologize for that, where he said this, but Poles did say, quote, "What I like to hear about the pairing so far, free agency and the draft, what I really like about the pairing so far, free agency and the draft, is I do believe that the supply of playmakers is matching our needs. Players, excuse me. So they are going to there is going to be good opportunities for us." End quote. Then he also said, in addition to that, quote, "There's a strategy to that. I would probably argue and say that if you get a good pass rusher and you draft a pass rusher, you can't have enough good ones. I think we all watched that game of the season in the Super Bowl, that proves to be true. You want to see you how you could put the puzzle together where you can kind of fill all the needs perfectly. Sometimes it works out, but sometimes it doesn't." End quote. And that is true. Sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. You have to put yourself out there though. And as far as free agency goes, that means throwing money at the big time free agents because you went the last 3 years and you made some additions to this team, but none of these guys were ultimate difference makers. You need an ultimate difference maker on defense. You need difference makers on the offensive line. You need to go out there and you need to get the best free agents available, and you need to continue to add through the draft as well. And going into the top shelf free agent market. So recently this has changed. Trey Smith was franchised. The Chiefs got it done today. They put the franchise tag on him, which is going to pay him roughly 23 million for the year. Um, this doesn't rule out a trade. The Chiefs did do this last year when they decided to franchise tag Ladarius Sneed and they ended up trading him to the Titans. And I forget what the actual return was for that, but they franchise tagged him. They got some picks for him, and instead of paying him on that franchise tag, they gave him to the Titans and they basically got a pick for him. So this is just a way of them not losing Trey Smith for nothing because they know how valuable he is and they knew how valuable he was going to be in free agency as well. Um, the Bears were highly, highly interested, and I can definitely prove that with a quote that I have from somebody next on the next slide. But just really briefly before we continue on to the next slide, Travis Kelsey's returning for the 25 season, and his career trajectory is amazing. He is one of the best tight ends in the game. I don't think he was fully healthy last year. It doesn't surprise me that he's coming back. It sounds like he wants to go back and prove one more year that he can still play the game. But there's to me, there's no scenario where he comes back again after next season. I think he's done. Regardless if the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, they make it or not, um, it doesn't matter. I think he's last next year is gonna be his last year, and that's just what I think. So going back to the Trey Smith situation, Ben Devine, who is a normal Bears fan, but a great reporter for Chicago Bears News, um, he went on to post on X today when the news got released about Trey Smith signing the franchise tag. And I quote, he said, "The Chiefs were indeed going to lose out on Trey Smith, as he was going to test the market, as he and the Chicago Bears had strong mutual interest. Now, franchised, he stays in Kansas City." End quote. So that just proves the point. The Bears had strong interest in him, and I'm not surprised. I'm glad to hear this news. I'm sad that the franchise tag got put on him, but they do have draft capital if they really want him badly and they still think that he can be their franchise guard that can help this team take the next step for Caleb Williams in this offense. I wouldn't rule out a trade. Um, you got to pay the guy obviously if you trade for him, but the Bears are willing to do that. Ryan Poles made the trade for Montez Sweat a couple years ago and ended up paying him after they traded for him, so I wouldn't rule it out. Um, However, a pivot for this was posted by Ben Devine saying, quote, "The Bears are in on both Drew Dahlman and Trey Smith in free agency. If Smith gets too pricey, look for Mekhi Becton, who was a guard for the Eagles, or Aaron Banks as a pivot." And Aaron Banks is from the 49ers. Mekhi Becton would be the pick here for me. I think, obviously, he just won with the Eagles. They moved him to guard after him coming into the league as a tackle. Didn't work out with the Jets. Went on to the Eagles. Now he's a Super Bowl champion. And honestly, like I'd have to do some more research and look into his PFF grading and all that. I could probably do another video on that, which I probably will end up doing some videos on the free agent guards and tackles out there that the Bears could sign. But anyways, moving on to this. Yeah, I think Becton would be the pick for me here. If I would be very happy if they ended up signing him because for the price that you pay for Becton, if you're getting him to replace Smith on that line, obviously you're not getting a Trey Smith caliber player, but you're still getting a very solid guard, starting guard, and you're gonna pay him probably maybe like less than half of what you would pay Trey Smith. So if Smith was 22 mil a year, you're gonna end up paying Becton maybe like 11 million a year, 10 million a year. What's the number here, guys? Who knows? But no, excuse me, gotta go back because I think I messed up this slide. Um, yeah, so to me, I think that Becton would be a solid pivot. We'll see if the Bears talks go up on trading for Trey Smith, but I don't know. It just might be too hefty for them to do that when they have a bunch of other needs as well. This whole Brett Veach thing on the draft combine, I had this whole slide here saying that it didn't sound like he's very confident in signing Trey Smith from the interview that he did here, and I have the link to this.
Free agents that seem like priority on one side of the ball. Trey Smith, a guard, and Nick Bolton, a linebacker. Their franchise tag numbers are kind of high and skewed because of the way they kind of gauge that. Does that make it really tough on you to maybe do something with them?
Yeah, they're both unique because, I mean, the 34 backers, I guess, get tagged in with Nick and then the tackles with Trey. But, again, another element to the uniqueness of the challenge. But both are outstanding players and, more importantly, I mean, just outstanding leaders in the locker room. And blessed that we've had them for the 4 years. And needless to say, I mean, we're going to have conversations, and I think it will be a priority to get both back. There'll be challenges because of where we are with our roster, and but I do feel like there is a scenario that both guys can be back, and I think it'll be at the top of our list, as you mentioned, Pete. I mean, those are the top guys on offense and defense, and we'll have extensive dialogue, and hopefully we can figure something out.
Is that a realistic scenario? Like, truth be told,
I think it's in play. I mean, I don't know if anything is. I mean, every time you have an offseason plan, I don't know if anybody's offseason plan is ultimately like, unless you have one guy that you want. I think everybody has a combination of different things they want to accomplish. So I think you just go in there and it's contingency plan after contingency plan. So you're going to have, okay, we want to get these guys done, and then it kind of works like a flow chart. Yep. You're going to have other scenarios, but we're going to go in and hopefully we can figure something out with Trey and with Nick, and we'll have backup plans, and we also feel that there'll be pockets of players in the draft that can address those needs. And so between our backup plans on both sides of the football and the draft, we'll have enough good players out there. It's just our job to find them and add them to our roster.
So I don't know if you guys, very listened in detail on that. You can't see his body language unless you're watching on YouTube, but it just didn't seem like he knew exactly what was going to happen. And I mean, to his credit, what GM really does know, they try to do all they can to re-sign good players and get good players. But I think the only way that were able to keep Trey Smith was to do that franchise tag, and I don't think that deep down they really wanted to. Um, they knew he was gonna test free agency because he wants to get paid, and they don't have the money to sign him long term like that. You know, it just kind of sucks to see a player like that not be available on the free agent market. But like I said, Brett Veach spoke there, and his confidence on signing both of those guys didn't seem very high. But I mean, to his credit, he's been honoring his optimism and his words because they signed Trey Smith to franchise tag. So what are you gonna do? Okay, moving on to the next slide, guys. So the 2025 NFL draft. We've got news about a week ago or so that Ian Cunningham will remain in Chicago. Obviously, this sucks for the Bears because they weren't able to get those third round picks. One of them this year, one of them next year. So we just got to go on with what we have now, and hopefully Ian can find himself landing somewhere next year, especially if the Bears really take off this year and win some games. Um, and then we have a couple Adam Schefter quotes here that we found on X. He's been all over the place, obviously, one of the number one NFL reporters out there. The first one we're gonna say, Adam Schefter said, quote, I think the player that you get at number 10 in this draft is similar to the player that you're going to get at 35, end quote. This is very, very true, I think, and a lot of people are actually following, you know, Adam Schefter's words on this by saying the same thing, which leads me to believe that the Bears will trade down from 10. As it stands now, if you don't see one of those blue chip players there at 10, and I'm not including Ashton Genty in this because I do not think that the Bears are going to end up drafting a running back with their first pick in the first round with the 10th overall because they have so many other needs and they need to realistically they need to build this line obviously first and foremost in free agency if they can. They're still going to have to add to it, but I don't think the biggest need would be running back at that point because if Genty's on the board at 10, I still think there's a chance they trade down. Unless Mason Graham's there, Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, a guy like that, then I think they'll just run up to the podium and just give that card in right away. Genty, I love Genty, don't get me wrong. I don't know as of the way that the Bears sit right now with this roster the way it is, I don't think that they're in the market to get Genty that early. Okay, so Adam Schefter had another quote, and he said, of the many scenarios for the up and coming NFL draft, the one that makes the most sense is the Cleveland Browns using their pick on a quarterback, end quote. This caught me completely off guard because a quarterback in Cleveland? I mean, they have Deshaun Watson, so yes, they need a quarterback, but they have the number 2 overall pick. Depending on what the Titans do, they're gonna maybe get their choice of the second quarterback on the board. Okay, assuming that they get their pick of the quarterback, maybe, but they're gonna pass on elite talent like Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, Travis Hunter, just to get a quarterback. And this is Cam Ward and Sanders. I'm not sure if those guys really would do it for me, but that's very interesting by Adam Schefter to say something like that. Continuing on with 2025 NFL draft news here, the Bears, when I wrote this at the time, um, they only had 2 formal meetings scheduled, the Bears. However, they do have a lot more scheduled, and we can read off some more names here. But the ones that were announced first, and this is credit to Harrison Graham, Essen Genty, Boise State running back, and Zach Pearson announced this one, Mikel Williams, Georgia edge rusher. And according to NFL Rooms, at NFL Rooms on Twitter, X, the 3 teams showing interest in Ashton Genty are the Raiders, the Cowboys, and the Bears. So the Raiders are at 6, the Bears are at 10, and the Cowboys are at 12. So if the Raiders skip out on Ashton Genty and the Bears are there on the clock at 10, there I believe honestly there's a realistic chance that the Cowboys and the Bears make a trade so that the Cowboys will come up from 12 to 10 and select Ashton Genty. I'm not sure what the compensation would be. Let's say maybe like a third round pick or so. I don't think that they'd be able to get their second, but a third round pick might be sufficient enough to have them move up 2 spots to get their franchise running back. And the Bears can still end up drafting their running back in the second or third round. So it would work out for both guys. A couple other guys that we wanted to actually go over here, that the Bears have formal meetings with are Oregon defensive tackle Jamari Caldwell, Iowa safety Sebastian Castro, Penn State tight end Tyler Warren, who is a first round projected pick, Gunnar Helm, another tight end from Texas, and Terrence Ferguson, Oregon tight end. So a lot of tight ends here trying to get their tight end too. I don't think Tyler Warren's a realistic chance. You're just gonna have to draft him in the first round if you want him. I don't see that happening. If unless there's a odd scenario where he falls out of the first, then he is a run to the podium type of pick in the second round. So Ben Johnson here at the NFL Draft Combine press conference. We have got some juicy information about him. He said that the Bears will try to mimic Carolina by adding interior offensive line through free agency. Ryan Poles has said the same thing. They've both gone on to say that a center is definitely in the cards, and a center is a must for Caleb Williams' development in his second year. Which me, with this news of Trey Smith going back to Kansas City on a franchise tag, to me, this indicates that the Bears should be highly interested and more willing to go out and get Dahlman from Atlanta. He's the best center available in free agency. He's only 25 years old, and it will probably require maybe a little more than less than half of what you would have paid Trey Smith. So you're probably looking at 10 to 12 million a year for Drew Dahlman, but you're going to get a quality starter in a center there to help Caleb Williams' development in second year and beyond. You can draft a center later in this NFL draft because you've got guys, um, the Wilson kid from Georgia, the guy from Texas who um, Pat the designer loves, Jake Majors, I think his name is. These guys are like fifth round picks, I think, fourth or fifth round picks. So I think you can definitely draft your backup center slash future center to take over for Drew Dahlman if you end up paying him. And I think he's the free agent that they are going to pursue hard and go after now that Trey Smith is off the table. Um, yeah, like I said, the quote here from Ben Johnson, they asked him, "What do you think will help Caleb Williams most in his second year?" And he said, quote, "To help him out going forward the most, I do think we need a strong presence at center," end quote. And I did credit Ben Devine here. He did post this on his X. He got this juicy information from Ben Johnson at the press conference at the combine. And like I said, center's important. It's important for the development of a young quarterback to have a line so that he's not always getting killed every time he hikes the ball. And it just makes a lot of sense. And lately, a lot of the things the Bears organization has done over the years has not made sense. Finally, I think that it's going to make sense this year. What they do in free agency, what they do in a draft, and how they're going into the season next year will make sense because Ben Johnson is here. He makes sense. His coaching staff makes sense that he put together. Dennis Allen as the DC, Bieniemy as a running backs coach, Doyle, a little weird, but younger guy coming in with a lot of optimism. DB's coach that came in, Ben Johnson brought over Antoine Randall, the wide receivers coach. All these decisions that have been made so far have been great decisions. We don't know if they're the right ones yet because only time will tell, but it finally sounds and looks like they are doing things the right way. So we got to give them the credit that they deserve right now. And obviously, we wait until the draft's over, we wait until the free agency's over, and we rate them on that and wait until the season starts and see how they do. And that's what we have to do at this point. Um, a couple other things that Ben Johnson said. So this is his direct quote as well. They asked him about DeAndre Swift, and he said, quote, "He is a fan of Swift and believes he can ignite the Bears offense as a playmaker," end quote. Interesting, very interesting. Uh, Ryan Poles talked about getting Ben Johnson the running back help that he wants, the players that he needs at that position because he knows it's an important position. I'm not fully convinced that Swift is the right guy for that. I know that in Detroit, it wasn't ultimately up to Ben Johnson to trade Swift, but he was there and he did have a say in who was in his offense at the time. And they decided to trade Swift to the Eagles for a fourth round pick. And they went ahead and they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs and signed David Montgomery in free agency. And this could be a similar situation. Um, if you trade Swift now, I don't think you're going to get a fourth round pick, but you might be able to get somewhere about a fifth or sixth for him. And if you feel like that's valuable enough to let him go for that and get rid of that salary, open up some more space, you can definitely take the running back that you think you want somewhere like Ashton Genty maybe if you can get him later. If you rebuild your line, Amari Hampton if you trade back, Traven Henderson, Caleb Johnson. These are all guys. Cam Scattaboo. These are all guys in this draft that can easily be your running back one. Um, you can have Roshan be your two, or you can go out and you can sign Najee Harris, who's out there. And I didn't talk about him at all, but I think Najee would be the best fit for a Ben Johnson offense to take the David Montgomery role. He has angry runs. He's a great power back that can run inside, big body guy, and he can catch the ball a little bit too. But ultimately, he's also a big time blocker. So if you can get your pass catcher in this draft, and assuming you move on from Swift, maybe you draft Cam Scattaboo. He probably is the best pass catcher in this draft next to, I would say, Traven Henderson. And then you just go out and sign Najee, and you have your 1-2 punch there. There's going to be there's a lot of options out there, though. So it's going to be very interesting to see what Ben Johnson comes up with and what he lands on to be his starting running backs. Okay, so on to the next quote here. So this was according to Ben Devine on X, and he said that Ryan Poles mentioned the additions we will have to the running back group that get Ben what he needs. Truly sounds like the running backs are not currently on the roster. So this is just in addition to what I was just saying about the running backs on this Bears roster. And Ben Devine will agree with me. Declan Doyle could be the next Ben Johnson, according to John Morton, who is the new OC for the Lions. And this is interesting. Declan Doyle is the Bears OC that Ben Johnson ended up hiring. He's only 28 years old, but he's very highly talked about by Sean Payton from the current current coach of the Broncos, former coach of the New Orleans Saints, who worked with Declan Doyle over there in New Orleans. But he's been getting high praise, Declan Doyle, that is, as the Bears OC. Couple guys said 2 years too late, but this could be the next Ben Johnson. However, let's set our expectations here with this. We need Ben Johnson to work out first as the head coach before we can start talking about the next Ben Johnson, in my opinion. I guess they're saying he's the next good play caller, OC, type of person, but Ben Johnson's calling plays now. I don't see a scenario anytime soon where Declan Doyle's going to be calling the plays. Um, Maybe 2 years down the line, but there's gonna be a while before something like that happens. And so Ben Johnson said he didn't end up hiring his friends to be part of his staff, and that was sort of like in addition to what Dan Campbell told him. He said you don't really find your friends to be the best person for the job, so make sure to steer clear of that as much as you can. Find the right guy for the job. Um, according to Ben Johnson, the surprise hire that he was able to make was Al Harris. He didn't think he was going to be available for Dallas. The Bears seem to swoop in right at the right time there, right in the midst of Dallas firing or not firing, but letting go of McCarthy, trying to get a new head coach in there, every single coach was on the market, and they were able to get Al Harris, which I think Jalen Johnson and Stevenson are going to be great, assuming they keep Stevenson. I think he could be a solid player though if you get disciplined. But these two guys, I think they are in for a great season this year with Al Harris as their DB's coach. Um, Another interesting nugget here. Ben Johnson thinks that Darnell Wright can be his next Penny Sewell. And I like I want to give some credit to Kirsten Tanis here on X. She posted this awesome information that I'm going to read. And again, this is Kirsten Tanis. She has a lot of good stats that she posts on her X. Go check her out. Like I said, she's awesome. Um, so she posted on here saying that when Ben Johnson talked about Darnell Wright seeing potential that reminds him of Penny Sewell, and how excited he is to work with Darnell, she wanted to compare the stats of Penny Sewell in the second season to Darnell Wright's second season. So in Penny Sewell's second season, his offense grade was 80.6, run block was 83, pass block 74.2, gave up 2 sacks, 6 hits, 20 hurries, and his pass block efficiency was 97.6. And now in Darnell Wright's second season, which was last year, his offensive grade was 79.3, run block was 82.2, pass block 75.4. He gave up 6 sacks, which was 4 more than Penny Sewell. 3 hits, which was actually 3 less than Penny Sewell. 30 hurries, which was 10 more, but had a block of pass efficiency of 97. And like she said here, she added on, yes, Darnell gave up more sacks and hurries, but two things to keep in mind. Darnell was also left on an island 71% of the time. Ben's offense in Detroit was designed where Penny was only left on an island 58% of the time and rarely on critical downs at 24. Ben designs in more chip help. She didn't have the exact 22 numbers, but she's expected to be similar to a strategic choice. And Goff has a quicker time to throw than Caleb. Darnell had to hold his protection longer. She gave stats about Goff and Caleb. So Caleb in 2024 was 3.04 seconds. Percentage of passes less than 2.5 seconds was 40%, and Goff was 2.69 seconds in 2022, and his percentage of passes less than 2.5 seconds was 46%. So she just went on to say at the very end, it's great that Ben sees Darnell's potential and has put up upgraded O-line coaches in place to help him keep growing and unlock his full potential. And I agree. I think Darnell's going to be a great player. Moving on to the next topic here, Dan Campbell's insight on Ben Johnson's hire. Obviously, he has nothing but praise for Ben Johnson, and likewise, Ben Johnson has nothing but praise for Dan Campbell. Campbell believes Johnson has a good eye for talent. He told Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson that the most important thing they will do is hire their staff. And when the staff was assembled or being assembled, Campbell said, in quote, he hired a lot of good people. He built an outstanding staff. Some guys that he knew from the Saints, some guys that he didn't know from other places, like Bieniemy from the Chiefs, and DB's coach Al Harris. Obviously, Antoine Randall Wells with Campbell, so he knew him. But these guys have nothing but love and respect for each other in terms of Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson. Okay, so I wanted to put in Courtney Cronin report here. She's probably going to be on ESPN 1000 or 670 Score or both sometime today. She's reporting live most times from the draft combine right now. But this is continuing on for Dan Campbell's message to Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. Um, I guess I already put this in here, so I don't need to read it again, but he said the same thing. The most important thing you do is hire your staff. So I'll move on to the next slide here. Johnson talked about this earlier, noting that he didn't hire a bunch of my friends. I went outside of my circle on purpose because I wanted to collect a different mix of experience, of energy, ideas, and we're all going to make it come together, and it's going to be the Chicago Bears going forward. And this was from Courtney Cronin, like I said, on Ben Johnson about him not hiring his friends on the staff. Okay. Um, Next slide, guys. Tom Pelissero reports a lot. Obviously, he's one of the big time guys on NFL Network. He's there at the draft combine, and this was pretty cool to hear. So during the time of the Super Bowl, Ben Johnson's phone was going off a lot, and he said it was Caleb Williams. So Ben went on to tell Tom Pelissero, I just know that this is a hungry individual who's ready to get this career started off his because he's got the chance to be pretty darn special, end quote. And yeah, I think that the Bears' pride, they really held Caleb Williams back his first year because they didn't give him the protection he needed, and he had the playmakers, but when your line is not great and it breaks down so fast, it it screws with the quarterback's head mentally. And even though he, like, at times, he'd be able to dump the ball off to Swift or give a little, you know, shovel pass here to Swift or give a screen to Adunze or DJ Moore, like, take the easy stuff, the layups, if you want to call them. He just he wouldn't do it most times. He would run around like his head was, chicken was chopped off, and he would try to create something out of nothing, but I think he's gonna realize, this isn't college anymore. I cannot do this. I can't hold the ball for so long. I've got to get rid of it. It seemed like he was doing it more often in the second half of the season when Thomas Brown was actually the play caller. But none of these guys before him, Shane Waldron and even like Eberflus, none of these guys like ingrained that into him. They probably it seemed like they just wanted him to not make mistakes over anything, and they weren't allowing him to be him and take the layups as well, just to get the ball out. But all that's going to change with Ben Johnson. He's going to go over all that with him. He said that he doesn't want to take his ability to get the big time play in there, the explosive play. So they're all going to incorporate everything together, and it's going to be awesome. All right. Mel Kiper came out with his 2.0 mock draft. Um, it's funny that he has said on many occasions that he doesn't like running backs to go in round one, but in this one particular, and I have it posted here if you're following along on YouTube here, he has three running backs going in the first round. He has Ashton Genty going to the Raiders at 6, Martin Hampton to the Cowboys at 12, and he has Travion Henderson sneaking in the first round and going to the Minnesota. I'm sorry, this is Gray Zabel. Must have been another mock draft. Let's see. I guess maybe only two running backs then in the first round. I'm re-looking at it again, but yeah, okay, my mistake. Two running backs. That must have been a different mock draft I was looking at. Um, so a couple things here over Mel Kiper's mock draft, and if you're following along on YouTube, you can see the screen posted here. So the Bears end up going with Josh Simmons at number 10. It seems like a lot of, analysts out there that are doing these mock drafts are giving the Bears some sort of tackle or guard in the first round. And none of these have been trade downs or trade ups yet. They've been selecting players based on where these teams are currently slotted to draft. But to me, this just doesn't make sense to take a injured tackle at number 10 overall. When mostly the biggest needs that you have on this team are interior linemen and not tackles. I think Braxton Jones is fine. I think he's serviceable enough to be your starting tackle. If you want to give him some competition, then you draft a guy later. You don't draft another first round tackle to replace him because then you're just basically making him become a free agent next year and being out of a job this year. Um, Notable players who slid out of the first round for Mel Kiper: James Pierce Jr., edge rusher from Tennessee; Luther Burden, wide receiver out of Mizzou; Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle out of Michigan; and Nick Scorton, edge rusher out of Texas A&M, which I think the Bears are probably targeting Nick Scorton. I I wouldn't doubt if they were able to move down in the first and take him later in that first round, because if he's projected to be a second round pick right now, I don't think that they're going to take him at 10. And Kenneth Grant is interesting. Um, it seemed like he would be a first round pick, but some news came out recently that he had some kind of a hamstring issue. And honestly, like, I know the right now the plans are for him to do his pro day at Michigan, but I wouldn't doubt that this might actually bump him down the board. So that could mean that he would be available in the second round. But if these players are available for the Bears in the second round, they could land one of these guys in the second round and still get their guard or tackle in the first round. That'd be amazing. So, in addition to Mel Kiper's 2.0 mock draft, Daniel Jeremiah came out with his 2.0, and he had the Bears selecting Kelvin Banks Jr., who's offensive tackle from Texas at 10. A lot of analysts and people out there believe that Banks is more of a guard, which, if you decide to move Banks inside to guard and you're taking him in the first round, he's going to be your starter. And this could be a scenario for the Bears now that Trey Smith is off the table. If you want to move Kelvin Banks into the guard position from that tackle spot. But it's nice to see that he has flexibility to do both. And I think that there's a world where they could trade down and still get Kelvin Banks as well. Um, in addition to that, Jeremiah also had 3 receivers in the first round, but no Luther Bird in the third. So I'm not very sure. I'm not really sure what we're missing here with Luther Burden. I don't know why. Um, I have no clue why he's not in their mocks in the first round. I guess he had a down season this year, coming off of a great season in 2023. But I think he still should be a first round pick. He's got to be, to me, he's the second best receiver in this class next to Terrion McMillan from Arizona. And I just don't understand why right now why they're getting him out of the first round, but who knows? Maybe that changes. So, okay, Mel Kiper's not the one that did 3 running backs, but it was Daniel Jeremiah, and he had Traven Henderson going to the Vikings at 24. This sort of blew my mind. There's always going to be one pick that blows your mind when you're doing these mocks or seeing these mocks. But Traven Henderson in the first round over Quishon Junkins from the other Ohio State running back, you know, I think he did go behind Genty and Amarin Hampton, which, okay. But Henderson as the running back 3 is surprising, but also like in the first round because he's projected to be like a third round pick right now, maybe a late second. Um, he had a lot of offensive tackles and guards push up the board as well. So there's a lot of news out there saying that the Bears might be targeting an edge rusher, defensive tackle, defensive lineman in the first round. I mean, if these guards and tackles are pushed up so far, though, can you really afford to do that? Because then you're not getting a chance at getting a great caliber starter in the second round. But who knows how it ends up? We don't know. That about does it for me, though. Thanks for watching, everybody. I appreciate your time. If you tuned in to YouTube and you saw the slides, please let me know what you think about that. I'm going to be back with another video pretty soon. I'm going to have my like the most like players that I want the Bears to draft to go after, I'm gonna talk about the guys that the Bears have been linked to, and probably some more information down the line because this is the time of the year where the NFL season is going ramping back up with this draft combine. So thank you guys for watching again. I look forward in hearing your comments. Please like this video, share and subscribe, and I will talk to you next time. Thank you. CJ out.